crowded at the commissioners meeting yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tourism board was in.
Good evening, everyone. The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for August the 3rd, 2021 is now in session. Before I ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance or moment of silence, Elizabeth and I will be sharing the current mask guidelines with you. Our manager was kind enough to furnish this information to us earlier today. Just want to explain to you what the rules we're working under, that's all. With the CDC recommending all people wear masks in public indoor settings in more than 90% of the state's counties, including Dare County, we are once again asking those in attendance at tonight's meeting to wear a mask regardless of your vaccination status. As of July 23rd, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services said more than 94% of COVID-19 cases are among people who are not fully vaccinated. The CDC has said more than 97% of people in the hospital due to COVID-19 are unvaccinated. With the spread of the Delta variant, cases and hospitalizations have risen quickly in the state. People who are vaccinated can still get infected with the virus and transmit the virus. Elizabeth?
We need to do our part to make sure we don't find ourselves in an extreme situation in the months ahead. We need to quickly turn this around. Governor Roy Cooper has not issued a mask mandate, but is urging people to follow the latest CDC guidance, which calls for people to wear masks regardless of vaccination status in counties with substantial or high spread of the virus. It appears all the critical trends are going in the wrong direction. Absent people getting vaccinated and continuing to wear masks, we're going to continue to see negative trends. This is not a challenge that's going to go away without action.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You can now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good job on the pledge there, guys. During our moment of silence this evening, I would ask you to keep the people in many of our cities who are being killed or injured by senseless shootings or attacks by an out-of-control element of our society in your thoughts and prayers. Let's all give thanks for where we live. Thank you. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Leo. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All in favor of approving the evening's agenda, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. The town manager asked if we could adjust the consent agenda slightly, remove one item from it and transfer it to a different part of this evening's meeting. So I would make a motion that we move item 3 under the consent agenda, before I ask for approval of that, down to item 6A under new business. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Any question? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 We've taken care of that. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, council.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Jim. Do you second it, Leo?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion about that at all? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 We now have an agenda, consent agenda. This time, it's time for staff reports. Our Deputy Town Manager and Planning Director, Wes Haskett. Good evening, Wes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Have a report for y'all tonight for the month of July. There were a total of 62 permits issued. Those consisted of 10 zoning permits, 14 building permits, 3 lot disturbance stormwater management permits, 1 lot disturbance demolition permit, and 34 trade permits. The total amount of fees collected in July was $9,135.20. With respect to the Town Historic Landmarks Commission, they met here on July 27th. They considered a designation application for 92 Ocean Boulevard. That was to designate the property as a historic landmark, and the commission unanimously recommended disapproval of the designation to you all. Since that time, the applicant has withdrawn her application, so it will not be considered by council. Lastly, with respect to the Town Planning Board, they'll be meeting here on August 16th at 5:30 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is for the board to discuss potential requirements for produce stands in the commercial zoning district and to consider ZTA-2108, a zoning text amendment application submitted by the town and Town Code Section 36-165 signage. And that also is coming from the Town Code update, as we've been discussing for the past several months. We have not received a revised site plan from the marketplace at this point, but it may be considered depending on when it is received. But as of today, me producing this report, we have not received it. Any questions?
What's the deadline for Marketplace?
I told them that we would accept it up until the week before the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Wes? Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Can you folks here all right? David Cole.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. July 2021, as far as calls for service, there were 1,288 total calls for service. As you can see on the pie chart, there's a breakdown of those. Under the incidents, which were actual crimes that were reported, we had 21, which resulted in 40 total charges. Under the criminal arrests, we had 15 for a total of 31 total charges. Majority of those 18 of those were drug related. Under the citations, officers conducted 115 traffic stops, and out of that they issued 37 written citations and another 65 warning citations. And then as far as ordinances go, our community resource officer, she's been very busy upsetting people. She issued 124 ordinance violations. 108 of those were failure to display. And we had 14 motor vehicle accidents for the month of July. Questions, concerns? Go ahead.
I have one question. Does it fall under your purview then to give citations for the people that are leaving large items out on the curb?
Say that again. I know, it sounds like.
There's a number of people that are leaving sofas, pallets, all kind of stuff that's normally picked up during a large item pickup. Does that fall within you guys?
That's code enforcement.
I'm sorry?
That's code enforcement. We don't.
Code enforcement.
Oh,
No,
okay.
These
okay.
are parking, most of this is parking violations. And parking in the right of way and those types of things. And some of it also relates to dogs on the beach and that type of stuff. But yes.
I just have one question for you, Chief. Can you explain to everyone, including me, where the actual fee money that is related to citations that your officers write ends up?
I'm going to try. I put a phone call into our clerk of courts, Dean Tolson, but he was tied up today and did not get back to me. So what I can tell you is this is a copy of the 2020, the most up-to-date one I could find from North Carolina. This is just the cost, court cost. So for example, if you get a speeding ticket, it could be a $300 speeding ticket, but you're also going to pay this court cost. And this is just a breakdown of where that money goes for the court cost. I have been unable to, I've been told 7 different places that the money goes, the fine money. So until I know for sure, I'm not going to tell you because 5 people couldn't tell me. So I'm waiting for Dean to get back to me. This I can tell you is this is above and beyond whatever the fine is. This is usually the most expensive part. And as you can see, the breakdown right there, normal court costs are anywhere from 180 to 200 and plus. And as you can see up here, the general fund for North Carolina gets the biggest chunk of it. That's $147.50. I have copies of this I can hand out to you afterwards. The facilities fee is $12. That actually goes to the local court for their building of their facility. $4 is to telecommunications and data connectivity. $7.50 is actually for the law enforcement, retirement, and insurance under the general statute. And then this just increased in December of 2020, law enforcement training and certification fee under general statute, $3. And then another one that was increased was for the indigent defense fee. That was $2 for a total of $176. Then if it's a Chapter 20, which is your motor vehicle violations, another $10 is added. And then there's also, if there's a request, there's also a DNA fee. That's $2. And then there's a $5 service fee for each arrest or service of a criminal process, including the citations or subpoena. And that's an additional $5. If that.
So would it be correct to say that none of those monies ends up in the budget of the town of Southern Shores?
Not according to this.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't.
But even the other part, the
Nope.
The fine itself, I have no idea
okay.
yet.
He was gonna-
Oh, Ben is going to help us out.
Typically, they're going to go to the school board.
The schools. Okay. Local schools?
Yes.
Okay,
The
thank-
the typical rule is that ordinance violations are, if they're available as a crime, then they would go to the school board. If they're only listed as civil penalties and civilly collectible, then they go to the town. So some of your ordinance violations would go to the town. If they're treating it as a crime, it will go to the school board.
Gotcha.
Now, whether or not the ordinance actually says it can be treated as a crime, I'd have to look.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Whether or not the ordinance actually says it can be treated that way, or whether it has to be collected civilly, I would have to look at what the ordinance says, and that's what's really going to drive it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that's why I didn't report it, because it was about as clear as mud when I looked it up
Okay.
on the state website as far as what parts of that go to a school funding and what types of general statutes actually fall under that category. So,
Well, I apologize. I didn't think this was going to be as difficult a question to answer as when I asked it. So I appreciate all the information. It's definitely a learning process to figure out where all this stuff goes and how it works. So thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. This time, my fire chief. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you guys tonight? Good evening. So for the month of July, the fire department responded to 95 calls. Pretty easy breakdown. 3 brush fires, 41 EMS calls, 6 motor vehicle accidents, 3 with injury and 3 without, 2 surf rescues, 1 hazardous condition, 2 gas leaks, 1 electrical problem, 15 service calls, which are basically your beach wheelchair program, your address signs, smoke detectors, things like that, 2 public service, 1 authorized burn, 2 standbys, 3 canceled en route, and 10 fire alarms. So it basically is about 51% medical, 10% fire alarms, 7% actual fires, and then you have probably 21% service calls. So for a total again of 95. I went back. I thought it was a little kind of haphazard just to give you 1 year because last year was kind of a COVID year, kind of screwed everything up. So last year we responded to only 80 calls in July, but the year before was probably more accurate. We're at 101. So we're a little behind last year, but typical summer stuff. So any questions?
Any questions, Rick?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. This time I'll call on our town manager, Cliff Ogren. Good evening again, Cliff.
Thank you. Apologize for having a PowerPoint, but it helps keep me on track. I did want to illustrate a few things. What I want to report on tonight, and I'll be asking for your input and direction on some of these items, are the traffic, or future tourism impact grants, a BRIC grant, which stands for Building Resiliencies and Infrastructure in Communities. And then also I'll finish up with beach nourishment at the end. Let's see. All right. So first with traffic management, some of this may be somewhat redundant, but I did want to go back through and just kind of elaborate on some of the steps that we've taken to date. And when I'm describing to folks that may not fully appreciate the magnitude of some of this, I asked them to picture, and I've put these up before, but I asked them to imagine these 2 pictures in front of their house, and you know the impact that it would have to them if they're on an otherwise quiet residential street, but this is what they see looking out, and I just hope that helps put some of this in perspective for those that may not fully appreciate the magnitude of it. But steps taken to date, there's only 2 remaining weekends of the no left turn. And as you recall, we started with 8, but in response to some concern that we were going to have a heavier start to the season than we originally thought, we added 2 weekends to the beginning. You all authorized local traffic only barriers and signs that originally at 4 locations, and we've added 4 more. And I want to talk to you tonight about 2 other locations. And we've added road closures via the travel app on Waze. And then I'm going to talk about the discretion you authorized me in regards to closing the median on East Dogwood. This is hopefully what users of Waze see when they are getting directions to points north of us through Duck and Currituck. the town is a partner with Ways for Cities. And what that means is I'm able to go in and edit maps. On Saturday mornings, I can go in and put indications of road closure, that the road is closed in certain areas of town. These are the places now that I've indicated those closures. And I started out on Saturdays doing it from 10 to 8 on Saturday and then 11 to 8 on Sunday, but I've just gotten to the point now where it's 10 on Saturday to 11 on Sunday. This is something that has to be done every weekend. Before, when we tried to do this, the first car that would go through this closure would eliminate that closure because it would signal to Ways that it's not actually closed. Thankfully, we've been able to get to the point now where these should be staying throughout the day. But again, if folks have been coming to Southern Shores, if they've been coming to Duck, if they've been coming to Corolla, they aren't using Waze, and so they're ignoring this. But this is what users should see when they're getting directions. Back, I think it was July 6th, you authorized us to close, in our discretion, to close the median at East Dogwood and also closing Hickory somewhere between the East Dogwood and Hillcrest. And we tried this the very next weekend. My concern with closing Hickory that weekend was we hadn't given people enough time. We hadn't given people enough notice that if you live on Hickory in that section, my fear was that someone was going to leave their house and get to a road closed, and we hadn't told them that. So we mailed postcards in hopes of notifying folks that this was something we may do the following weekend. We closed the median at Hillcrest, Sea Oats, and Wax Myrtle, and we did this not knowing if it was going to work. So we didn't use, if we were to do this in the future, we'd have to use something considerably more substantial, because what ended up happening was somebody frustrated, and I think they pulled the post out and pulled the chain out. But we would have to do something obviously more substantial, because if people get frustrated, they're gonna remove these. But what we learned was these numbers will show you that the weekend before we tried this was July 4th, so I didn't include those numbers because obviously that kind of skews things. But if you look at these kind of key sections where we take data for traffic, on the 26th kind of being the mark before we implemented this, you'll see on Wax Myrtle, we take data at Wax Myrtle, Sea Oaks, and Hillcrest in about the same block. Wax Myrtle went from 408 cars on June 26th to 992 cars on July 10th. Now, that means either folks were staying on 12, getting on East Dogwood and taking the very first right they could, or the numbers went way up as soon as that somebody removed the post. And it was kind of like we say, traffic's like water. It's going to find its way out somehow. But really what I wanted to point out here, and there's no real rhyme or reason, Sea Oats saw less traffic. But if you look at Hickory, the impact that this had on Hickory that weekend was pretty substantial. They had 1,367 cars on the 26th, and then on July 10th, folks that are cutting through, that's the only way they could get out. It went up 149%. They saw 2,000 more cars than they would typically. And if you look at the next weekend, July 17th, it goes back to, when we open everything back up, it goes back to somewhat normal numbers. I included, you get further north into town, the 300 block of Sea Oats, they see a tremendous amount of traffic. It helped some. It reduced the traffic by 14% for them. I included Trinity because I'm starting to hear more that the measures that we're taking are just, again, like water. It's just pushing traffic onto that section of town. And then 13th Avenue, that was just kind of giving you that these numbers are good comparisons because they stay pretty typical. 1,100 cars leaving town on average each weekend. And then, so we're continuing to do the no left turns on Sunday, but again, these numbers kind of hit you when you look at them. But what I wanted to illustrate to you was the difference between the no left turn on Saturday and Sunday. If you look at the bottom, the average cars that we have on South Dogwood headed north, it's about 3,600 cars on Saturday and only 1,800 on Sunday. I picked Wednesday as kind of a comparison. You'll see that on Wednesday we have 1,400. There's only 400 cars more on average on a Sunday than there are on a Wednesday. If you look to the far right, you'll see the average amount of cars, the difference between Saturday and Wednesday. There's 2,200 cars on average more on Saturday than Wednesday, and only 400 more on average on Wednesdays. Now, there's only 2 Sundays left, but this, I think we have to kind of consider. I mean, we're paying $3,900 a weekend, and I think we have to kind of look at this to see if we're getting enough bang for the buck on those Sundays. One thing I want to show that, again, how these numbers are so hard to put a whole lot of stock in, because if you look at June 26th on that Sunday, there were 439 less cars on Sunday than there were on Wednesday. And there's no true, I don't know how much you can truly ascertain out of some of this. But getting out before we tried this, because I think a lot of folks thought we had closed the street. And you could still access every street. You could drive every mile in town. No street was closed. But those maybe folks that are in the business of trying to service houses and need to get through town, they seem to be the most upset because they couldn't take a left on East Dogwood where they typically head. And that's why I think traffic backed up so much on Hickory. But I think it's something we should maybe consider doing again with more input. I think part of this is that in order for us to make a decrease in some areas, there may be an increase in other areas, and that's the balance we're trying to fight. We don't want to burden someone that hadn't been burdened before, but that traffic again has to go somewhere. And I think that's a difficult thing trying to balance, is how much we're willing to accept as we shift. I'm just sharing this as an example of something. A citizen shared this with me, and I wanted to put it out there for something that we could consider maybe in the future. This would have an impact. This is just one example, and I'm not asking that we employ this now, but this would make making a right or a left off of East Dogwood, there'd be no reason to do that, because you couldn't exit back out onto 12 if we were to implement these closures. And that would mean folks up on the north end of Sea Oats would have to go back to East Dogwood to go north to Duck. It would mean it would have impacts. It would mean if we needed mutual aid from Duck at a house on at the north end there, they'd have to come to East Dogwood to go back up. But it would take away the incentive for vacationers to use East Dogwood to take a left to navigate out. But what I heard kind of overwhelmingly, but I heard quite a few folks that would be discouraged or be negatively impacted by this. And that's, to me, again, is the balance. How do we find that balance? And then there's, you could add other, as much as we can tolerate, there's other places that we can add to funnel traffic in one direction to get them off of the side streets. The barricades, what I'm sensing here is that, every weekend we get a new set of visitors that come in and they see these barricades for the first time. I'm getting the sense that the locals are getting tired of dealing with these barricades. And I need to stop here and mention that we cannot write tickets for cars that are going around these barricades. We cannot write a ticket to someone simply because they have an out-of-state license plate. If we could, that revenue would not go to the town. And so it's not a revenue generator for us. But to pull a car over simply because you don't think they have a right to be on that street, it's putting the town at pretty major risk. The idea all along was in hopes that they would deter some. And I've heard a lot of the towns ignoring it. We're not enforcing it. And I think that's where a lot of the discontent is coming from. But I've heard some say that if it catches 2 out of 10 cars, then it's worth it. And what I have heard and would maybe like to consider, I mean, again, we're getting close to the end of the summer here, but folks on Juniper have asked for a sign like this, and folks at Ocean Boulevard at the Split have asked for a barricade like this. So at some point, I don't know if we're going to keep doing this or not, but I would like to consider adding additional barricades in these 2 locations. And that brings me to the one application of 2 that I'd like to suggest we make to the Dare County Tourism Bureau for a tourism impact grant. We collect a lot of data, but that we don't know how many of those 11,000 cars are locals, how many of those are where they're headed exactly. We do know that, based on the counts that Duck gets, we can kind of subtract out how many are staying in Duck, and the rest, it's about 60% that are going on to Duck and Corolla from Southern Shores, and then a percent stays there, and the rest are going on to Corolla. But one thing we could apply for is a program called Streetlight Data, and that will take cell phone data. It'll take information from all sorts of data points, and it'll tell us where the cars are coming from, and where they're going, and how they're getting there. And so that it gives us a little bit better of an idea. And it's something I asked the Tourist Bureau about applying for, and I think it's something that would be helpful information not only to the town, but to all the towns as well as the county and Tourist Bureau. So I'd like to consider an application for this. We could also, going forward, if we were to employ any other more permanent measures for traffic, I mean, obviously it's a tourism impact. And what I'm talking about is more than just a post in the ground and a chain. This would have to be something more substantial if that's something we wanted to consider. So that could be a part of this grant application. If we were to apply for $50,000, there's no match. From 50 to 125,000, there's a match, and then above 125, there's a greater match. So I'll stop here because I'm about to transition into something else and have any questions or feedback from you all. If this grant is something you're interested in, I can bring it back to you at your August or September meeting for application.
And tracking where these cars are coming from, would that help us to determine how many people are coming from that 64 corridor?
Yes, it would.
Because those are all right turns onto South Dogwood. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd be able to, and Councilman Niels probably knows more about how this works than I do, but I think we'd be able to track exactly how that car got to whether it came from 64, whether it went to Food Line and turned around, whether it went to 7-Eleven and turned around, or however it did what it did, we'd be able to track that.
As you know, Cliff, I have some concerns about when you closed the median on East Dogwood and didn't allow cars to take a left turn there or coming off East Dogwood and trying to go north. I didn't think that was I felt that was impacting our residents more than some of the other measures we've taken. That's why I was not in favor of it. But what's the alternative to that? If we're going to force people who live here year round to not be able to get back to their residence, not get involved in all the traffic on Highway 12, that seems unfair, not a way to resolve it. And I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying, are there other options?
If we're going to route traffic, it'll have a negative impact on someone. Now, negative being a broad or narrow term, but it will have an impact on someone that hadn't had it before. And if that's fair or not fair,
Right.
I don't know.
So I guess what I'm asking for is there is a combination that allows us to have the minimum impact on our citizens, our residents, and helps reduce some of the flow from the non-resident, some of the volume of traffic from them. And where is that? I don't know the answer, but where is that medium? Is there one?
I think it lies in something in this kind of idea of redirecting traffic.
Up there.
And this is something I'd want to, be prepared to go into if we were to do something like this, that we had enough prep time to prepare folks that this is something we would consider doing.
The other question I have is the people who live on the most impacted streets, which are obviously South Dogwood and East Dogwood, and then of course even more impacted is CO North and Hillcrest North. Have they seen an improvement with that? They feel it's really been better in this last 8 weeks or so of trying to minimize or reduce the traffic volumes on their streets?
I think it depends on who you ask. I've heard both. I've heard, that there's been some improvement, and I've heard that, that things are the same, which goes back to the balance.
Mhm.
Right.
But at this point, I guess the two questions: do we want to continue Sunday, the no left turn? And you've given me, I guess, in the past you've given me discretion. I'm not sure that I would continue the Sundays at this point, but I would consider adding barricades at these two locations. But there's concern about the barricades. I realize that. We've had folks that get caught, they can't turn wide enough to get around it, and they back up, and we had a collision, and that's a concern. So I guess those are the two things I'd kind of want your input on. Do we keep doing the Sundays? Do we add the barricades?
I think I would certainly entertain not doing a Sunday through the rest of the season, given the numbers that you've shown us and what I've experienced anecdotally. I think that Sunday preceding Memorial Day was pretty terrible. That was a Sunday prior to Memorial Day. And what we've seen thus far is most of the traffic seems to be focused on Duck Road. Because, I'd rather experiment with it this season than maybe finagle through it next season as we're trying to come up with preemption measures.
An idea like this wouldn't require barricades. It would require cul-de-sacs, I think, temporary cul-de-sacs. But
Which then limits you 2 ways through town.
That's-
Either over Juniper, Chickahawk, or South Dogwood, the East Dogwood. And the ones over in Chickahawk, we don't have any other road out. We're stuck with what's there, which is no problem, but I can tell you it'll impact at Chickahawk, because we've had a couple weekends where that's been backed up there. And I understand they've changed it, or appears they've changed the timing. It takes a little longer to get out of there. But if you want to limit traffic through town, that's an option. I'm not saying it's the best one. But maybe they won't come next year as much as they have this year, because they're like ants. And it's not, we've got it there, and I've gotten caught in it. I've had some experience, and the more I sat there and thought about it, if I was a tourist or a guest here, I got to sit in that traffic getting in here. I got to sit in that traffic getting out of here. Then while I'm here, I got traffic all over the place. You can't go anywhere without some delays. So I personally, if I had to do that, I don't know if I'd consider this a good place to come visit or spend a week and have to fight with something I left.
Well, unless there's objection, I'll suspend the next 2 Sundays and put local traffic only signs in these 2 locations.
Ocean Boulevard has gotten some of the overflow.
It has.
Because it's been, this past weekend, it was back down quite way down. from Hickory.
We're gonna do away with the no left turn on Sunday,
Yeah, and,
just the next 2 Sundays.
right,
Okay, I'm good with that.
okay. And then I'll post
And-
local
and then
traffic
add
only in these
these,
locations.
And then add these. Are you going to put one on, is that the plan
Juniper
on
and
Juniper?
Ocean Boulevard. And then I'll bring this grant application back to you with more than, I mean, we can apply for 50,000. The streetlight data analysis isn't going to cost us 50,000. So we'll add other traffic related things to this.
Let me just comment, the tourism board is well aware of our issue because I've been sharing the numbers with them. So,
Yes.
so that it won't be a new venture for you.
The other thing I'd like to get some consensus on for a tourism impact grant is going through a process to consider future paths. One of the things that keeps reoccurring out of the traffic comments that I'm getting is that folks need a safe place to walk. Folks at the north end of town on Duck Road have asked for crosswalks where there aren't. And of course, the crosswalks in Duck are part of the reason some people blame for this traffic. So they've asked that we consider a path on the west side of 12 to get them to safely to a crosswalk. Folks in Ocean Boulevard have said they don't have a safe place to walk with all that traffic that's coming up. Hickory, I know this can be I'm venturing into a sensitive subject here, but I would like to be able to develop a plan that we can be able to be in a position next year for a tourism impact grant. We can budget for one of these projects and consider, and it may be as we go through all this and we decide we don't want to put up a path, but I'd like to be able to be in a position this time next year to have a project ready to apply for a tourism impact grant. So I guess what I'm looking for is maybe I bring back to you a plan for moving forward for putting together we have this pedestrian plan that was done in 2014. It lays some of this out already. I think there's the makings to put something in front of the public, to get some public input and come up with a plan moving forward. So I don't want to not apply for tourism impact grants if we have projects ready to go.
I think the trail on East Dogwood and the trail on South Dogwood have been significant improvements to our public safety, which is one of our primary jobs. And I think it's one of the most important things we've done. And I think the use those trails are getting by majority of our residents has really, to me, has really been wonderful all around. So I say let's shoot for more paths if we get more trails if we can.
More walks.
I could definitely see a couple of public meetings so we can get lots of input from folks about what they think about the idea and where they would like to see them. I think that'd be great.
Okay.
I think hearing from the public is a very good idea, but for me personally, I can't help but think that section on the northern part of 12 isn't a critical area. Right now, it collects people from the streets and everything, and some of them don't even have crosswalks. They have to get across NC 12. So it seems like focusing on that corridor from East Dogwood to the north to the town line, that needs attention in a lot of ways. And one of them could be a walkway on that side of the
On the west side.
NC 12. On the west side, yes.
Because there's one on the east side.
Okay. The next two, these are just kind of updates. The Building Resiliency in Infrastructure and Communities Grant, this is the timeline. We'll have to submit a letter of interest by October 1st. I've talked with VHB, who's the engineering firm who put together our last stormwater study, I think that was done about a decade ago. And out of that came the East Dogwood, the retention basin there across from the fire department. That was a project designed in that study. What I'm talking with them about is trying to engage them in a process to move forward for a project we did this, you authorized us to start this process last year, but it's a very involved, in-depth process. Duck submitted last year and they still haven't gotten through. They've gotten green lights, but they still haven't received their funding. It's a long process. But I'd like to come back to you with there's going to be a cost associated with this grant application. I think Duck paid about $85,000 for theirs. Ours would not cost that much. It wouldn't be that involved, but there will be a cost associated with it. This same project received favor from, the grant first goes through the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. We got a green light from them from our letter of interest, but we just couldn't put everything together. But in this is the just illustrates our letter of interest was approved for the same project I'm talking about applying for next year. And out of that study, the Sea Oaks Trail around 12th and 13th Avenue, obviously that's a problem when it rains. And off to the right is a picture of that watershed. And the reason I think we got the initial green light on this project was they talk about the resiliency and the need for communities to be able to withstand disaster. And of course, if for all those folks that are leaving us to go to Duck and Crawler, they got to come back. And that street, during a storm, not during times of flooding, could be an issue for EMS, could be an issue for fire, public safety. So I think that's one of the reasons we scored high. But part of the process of applying for this is we could use some of the grant money to put together the plan to address the flooding problem there. And then finally, I wanted to end on beach nourishment. I think I'll be able to share this on the town website tomorrow, but we've got construction documents ready for the beach nourishment project. This is just one kind of snapshot of what the project will look like. And if I can do this, you'll see the toe, the beach fill you'll see that black line where the gray is the actual sand. That's the landward limit of the beach fill, and you'll see the seaward toe of the fill. It's now all berms. Nobody's steps are going to beach crossovers are going to get covered. There was concern, initially about the impact of that. That's not going to occur here. The pre-bid notice went out last month. These documents should be before the dredge contractors tomorrow. They're all aware of this project. August 12th is a mandatory pre-bid meeting. We should be getting the bids for this beach nourishment project at the end of the month. Right now it's August 31st. That could be pushed out a little bit further depending on the outcome of that pre-bid meeting. And of course we'll have to, and I'll put those construction documents so folks can see the impact of the project in front of their houses. We had an update from Ken Wilson in order to meet the 3 goals that were initially established for the project. A slight increase in fill of 14,900 cubic yards. So that takes the project from 878,300 to 893,200. That's all fine and well because we have a defined amount of budget to pay for this project. And the project will include 2 rows of sand fence from 4th Street south. And then finally, just to get you prepared for all the financing that you're going to have to be dealing with soon, this is the timeline, September 7th and October 5th meetings. You'll have some financing documents that you'll have to approve and review and adopt moving forward so we can make that application to the local government commission. And I apologize for how long that took, but if you have any questions, please.
What happened to the sand fence along the entire length of the beach? Is that something we have to contract out separately for, or?
Yes, there's enough money in that overall amount to pay for the sand fencing. We took that amount, we took the sand fence contract. The dredge contractors won't be bidding on the sand fencing and the beach grass. We'll handle that separately.
Okay.
I think we'll get more sand fence for sure, because they were just going to price it and pay somebody to do it. Then we can just pay somebody to do it ourselves.
Right.
We've done it in the past.
It might be worth asking Ken Wilson, but the dynamics of this effort may be totally different from the dynamics of what we did in front of Pelican Watch, but it wasn't but a few months after Pelican Watch was beach renursed, that sand fencing, and they went back and put up another row on top of that. So we may need a backup plan if we want to keep that sand fencing, but then too, it might be better to plant the beach grass plugs or whatever. But we can ask Ken Wilson, what's likely to happen in about 1 year's time? Would we need to be replacing that sand fencing or what?
You're adding more.
Or adding more?
Adding
Yeah.
more.
Okay, I'll be prepared. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. This time I'll call for general public comment.
You good?
Here we go.
No, we didn't get the town attorney in there.
He's nodding, okay.
Oh, okay.
Lionel Richard. Good evening, Lionel.
Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to address, I'm Lionel Richard, 10 Circle Drive, and wanted to point out that I have also seen a lot of the heavy traffic coming down Boulevard from the cell tower north to Hickory. I don't have an answer for the traffic. I wish I did. It's all over the place. And it's going to go somewhere. People are always going to get an edge, and I'm trying to get an edge to get ahead of that traffic. But it's 25 miles an hour from the cell tower up to Hickory. There's no sidewalks. There's no center line. A lot of blind corners. I almost got hit head on coming afternoon. It'd be nice to see some police presence. There's just a lot of blind corners, no sidewalks. Add the trash. You can barely fit 2 cars on that asphalt going, opposite directions. Sometimes it's backed up all the way to Mockingbird. Other times it's free, but people flying down all the way to Hickory, and then they want to take Hickory back to Route 12. Just be nice to see some kind of, I don't know if there's any kind of a speed limit warnings you can put up there or whatnot, but it's just, I don't know if everybody's kind of congregating that way down Boulevard. Just seems like it's been a little bit more than it has in the past couple of years, but again, I don't have the answer to the traffic, just making an observation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only person that signed up to speak. Anybody else sign up and we didn't get the page? All right, thank you. This time I'll close general public comment. Go to new business, item 6A, the emergency sick leave, emergency paid sick leave, emergency FMLA policy update. You're back up, manager.
When I originally put this on your agenda, my thought process is the same as it is now, but a lot's happened in that period of time. I mean, when we put this together, I didn't think I'd be wearing a mask tonight, but obviously that's not the case. In January, or excuse me, December 31 of last year, the COVID Relief Act had a provision that we had to provide 80 hours of paid emergency sick leave to employees that were affected one way or another by COVID. Either they got it, they had to quarantine, they had to take care of a loved one. There were several reasons. The town extended that on its own, and it's still in place right now. That policy is still in place now. There are certain things we have to do, adhere to in our policy to get the payroll tax credit, but that, we haven't seen that tax credit yet. And if we got it, it would be minimal, very much minimal. So at the time we asked you to extend this policy, the vaccine wasn't as readily available as it is now. And I'm not standing here suggesting that we require or mandate the vaccine. That's not the point of this. The point is, in order for an employee, it's my feeling that in order for an employee to be eligible to receive those 80 hours of emergency sick leave, they should be vaccinated. And for an employee that, and that's a choice. But if we're in a position where we're trying to, as you pointed out at the start of your meeting, to try and get this thing back on the right track, then we should be encouraging or incentivizing the vaccine. So, but there's the other aspect of this is we have, for whatever reason, employees may choose not to for medical religion. They're just concerned that there's not enough information yet. They're not ready to take the vaccine, and that's fine. And another way of looking at this is that this is a benefit that we've offered employees all along, and to take that benefit away now, especially when we're getting back into an area of concern. I mean, Dare County looks redder to me than the rest of the state does when I look at that map. It seems almost disingenuous to take that away now. So what I'm asking you to consider is to leave the policy in place, to amend it in order to be eligible, you have to be fully vaccinated to receive that 80 hours. And also, a lot of towns and counties have responded to this in a whole bunch of different ways. Some just didn't extend this policy. Some still have this policy in place. Some have incentivized the vaccine by giving a day of vacation. Some are even using the ARP funds, which I'm not suggesting at all, that for cash. I do think we should be incentivizing it. My request would be for you at a minimum to revise the policy and consider a day of vacation to incentivize employees to get the vaccine.
Everyone understand that?
As I understand,
Sort of.
I think I understand it. If I'm not vaccinated, and then I go get vaccinated, am I the one that gets the extra day of vacation? Or is it a current employee that?
It's both. If for those that have been vaccinated, they would receive it, and for those who get vaccinated moving forward, they would also receive it. So it would be retroactive to those that have already done so.
How long would that stay in place?
It would be one day for the vaccine.
That'd be at one point. So it's not reoccurring then.
No, sir.
Any questions, comments for Cliff?
Yeah, so the text that we have in front of us, we would give an incentive, you can get a day off to get the vaccine, but we're also saying you don't get your stay-at-home pay, or your sick leave pay if you're not vaccinated?
Correct.
Okay, so it's two. I wish you'd left that in the consent agenda. Oh. I have a couple questions. So I'm not vaccinated. I'm a town employee. I get COVID. I can't come to work, and I got to sit at home. Do they have sick days already within the policy, and how many of sick days is that?
They accrue sick leave. I think it depends on how long they've been here, but they would, at that point, there are one or two options. We would, under FMLA, we could hold that. If they had no sick leave, we would hold that position. If they had sick leave, they would use their own sick leave to cover that time.
And they would need proof of medical reason for not being vaccinated?
Correct.
Did you consider a religious exemption?
Well, yes. And I'm not sure how to verify that.
Yeah.
What was your question?
if a religious exemption was considered.
Would
That comes, I mean, with all honesty, I mean, I did not have childhood vaccinations because of religious exemption, because of what I was raised. I have been vaccinated for coronavirus, very first vaccination I've ever had. But from that experience, I can be somewhat sensitive to the person that might have religious exemptions. And I don't know that we have a staff member that has that, but it's something that occurs to me when I read text of it. They wouldn't have, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, the other, another option would be that we don't extend this. But I go back to those employees that haven't used this, and for one employee to be able to use it and another not, it seems just, I hate the word unfair, but it seems unfair to take
Creates
this.
a real tension in the workforce.
To take this away now, especially when we're going into what appears to be an increased season, it just seems the timing of that would be bad.
The challenge you would have, so to leave it in place now, everybody, no matter what, if they get coronavirus, they get the sick leave. But the challenge you would have is if somebody that's opting not to be vaccinated for whatever reason, and then their fellow employees have to pick up the workload when they're home for 2 weeks, and they didn't take an initiative to try to forestall that. That's sort of the internal office dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm 100% incentivizing a day off for our employees to get vaccinated. And this is a carrot and stick. You got
Right.
go get vaccinated, you get a day off. You didn't, we're not going to cover you. I don't know how I personally feel on that.
And
I'd rather, I think, extend it to all staff regardless of their vaccination status. But I'm one person.
And that's certainly a fair option.
If an employee still doesn't want to get the vaccination, the option of getting COVID tested on a regular basis, that still doesn't solve the problem, because if they test positive, then they have to quarantine. So we're back to where we started, which is, do we want to pay for their leave, or do we want to ask them to take their own leave? So that doesn't help us. I'm also in favor of the incentivizing part. I think that's personally a no-brainer.
The vacation incentive side, I have no problem with that. But I mean, with the seriousness of this virus, and specifically this latest Delta variant, and you look at the numbers here in Dare County, and if you get some underlying condition, you're really, dealing with your life. It's the old, I just read something the other day, or over this mask wearing. Well, it was a masket or a casket.
Yeah.
And the death rate is going that way too, nationally. So I would think if you got any respect for your family, you'd get vaccinated. But that's me, because I'm vaccinated. And I also get my flu shot.
I think we're better off to err on the side of accommodating these folks, like we've been doing at least for the foreseeable future.
Could we revisit it after we get an FDA approval on a vaccine? Because
Yes.
it keeps being mentioned that it might happen sometime this fall.
Yes.
Okay.
I asked that question of at least the county health department, and the answer was we may get that approval in the fall, which is around the corner. And so, yes, we could revisit this at that time.
Okay.
And leave the policy in place as is.
And include a day off.
Right.
Yeah.
This kind of mirrors a national debate. And if we have individuals on staff that are refusing or concerned about the vaccine, I can reiterate my own experience that I've never been vaccinated, and I have received a coronavirus vaccine. And all I would hope to do in this tricky situation we find ourselves in is to lead by example. And that's the example I'd like to set. I'd rather not punish a staff member for having concerns. I'm somewhat emotional about it, but I mean, that's from the heart. So that's how I feel about it, I think.
Well, and I also think if someone is working indoors for the town, if they have concerns about getting a vaccine or concerns about getting it before it gets FDA approval, wearing a mask is,
Yeah.
is the way to is the way to prevent that. But it certainly decreases the likelihood of the virus being
The
transmitted.
mask plus social distancing.
Yeah. So we can we at least add
But
that into our policy?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that, okay. Because it is concern for your fellow, the people that you work with,
Absolutely.
and I,
well, on the private side, you're starting to see they're mandating vaccines and masks, and if you don't, you daily or whatever to see if you got it. But Tyson, who was one that was heavily hit last spring with it, are now mandating all their employees are going to be vaccinated. And if you don't,
You don't keep a
let
job.
Don't let the door hit you.
And I understand where they're coming. It's
But
a
that's
slightly different
private.
statistical risk.
but that's
60,000 employees versus 25, and
No, but I'm saying that, private people can
Yeah.
sometimes have more flexibility in that type of thing.
Cliff, I didn't mean to. I mean, is that a consensus? I mean, I walked in here thinking about it, and I was like, oh, that seems like a sensible thing. And then I read the text, and I think my mind flip-flopped while I was up here. So,
If that's the consensus, we wouldn't need you to take any action on the policy, but we would need a motion to approve the incentive for getting the vaccine.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the incentive of for all employees who've already received vaccine and any employee that subsequently going forward does receive the vaccine. And that we also revisit this after we get an approved FDA approval on a vaccine. Talk about it again.
I would second that motion.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion is made by, indicate by saying aye.
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 What else you need, Cliff? You all right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get your question answered, Bonnie?
I did, yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we got 6.
Okay, where are we?
Item 6B, under new business, budget amendments 1 through 10, encumbered funds, page 9. Bonnie, do you want to discuss this with us or share your thoughts with us on this subject? It's page 9 and I'm thinking if once Bonnie tells us what she really wants, we just vote for all these at one time.
What she really wants.
Good evening.
Couple million.
Hey,
So all 10 of these budget amendments are things that were approved in the FY 2021 budget, that a purchase order was issued and the goods or the services were not received before June 30th. So what our accounting, what we're required to do is to reappropriate the money in this year's budget. So essentially, when the auditor comes in, which she'll be in 2 weeks, I think she's coming in to do the audit for last year. This amount of money, the amount of money for these budget amendments will be the unassigned fund, taken from the unassigned fund balance as not being able to be spent, because essentially it's going to be put in this year's budget for these expenditures. And I put on each of the budget amendments what they were for. I mean, I'll be glad to go through each of them if you need me to, but I mean, they're pretty, self-explanatory. There's, the piece of equipment that you approved for the public works, that was ordered but not delivered. Police vehicles were ordered but not delivered. Some of their equipment, some of the work from CPE on the beach nourishment, those contracts were not completed. So that's what all of these budget amendments are. It's reappropriating the money.
All the money went from last fiscal year's budget into our unassigned fund balance, added to it. Now we're taking from unassigned fund.
Correct. So what will happen when she does the audit, this money will dump into the unassigned fund balance, And then this amount of money will be set aside from what's available to be spent for this year.
Really
That is correct.
already encumbered.
I would make a motion to accept budget amendment number 1 for 10 as presented by our finance.
I'll second it.
officer.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of council voting to approve the budget amendments as presented to us, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion's made and carried unanimously. Sheila? Next item on our agenda tonight is the approval of planning board officers, page 24.
No, page 20. We're going to do the appointment. Page 20.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Planning board appointment, page 20. Thank you, Elizabeth. I got ahead of myself. That's hard to do, too. This is a application from Richard Gargansky, 95 Osprey Lane, to fill the currently vacant alternate 2 position of the town planning board. The term for this position began on July 1st, 2021, and expires on June 30th, 2024. There are currently no other applications on file. Staff recommended the appointment of Richard Gargansky to fill this alternate number 2 position on the town planning board. Any comments or questions or thoughts, council?
Well, I just want to recognize that our applicant is here with us this evening. You want to stand up, Rick?
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Rick.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming. I talked to Rick earlier this afternoon.
Good for you.
Well, it looks like he'd be a candidate for the fire department.
He does.
Oh,
Oh, there you
okay.
go.
You didn't indicate it, so. Oh,
Okay, that's excellent.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve Rick Gargansky as our alternate 2 for the planning board.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'd ask for the vote to appoint Mr. Gargansky to as alternate number 2 on the town planning board.
I'd like to just say one thing. Thank you, sir.
Indeed.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Welcome aboard. I know a business I went to before, don't we?
Yeah.
Approval of planning board officers, page 24. On at the July 19th, 2021 planning board meeting, the board re-elected Andy Ward as chairperson and Tony DiBernardo as vice chairperson. This is on our planning board. Section 24-24 of the town code states that the planning board shall elect its chairperson and vice chairperson subject to the approval of the town council. If approved, they will serve as chairperson and vice chair until July 2022, when the next election of officers is held. The staff recommends the approval of Andy Ward as chairperson and Tony DiBernardo as vice chair. I need a motion from you, council, if you're okay with this, to approve Andy Ward as chairperson and Tony DiBernardo as vice chair on the town planning board. So I have a motion.
Yeah, I do. I'll move that we approve Andy Ward as chairperson and Tony DiBernardo as vice chair for the planning board.
And I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion, council? If not, I ask for a vote. All in favor of approving Andy Ward and Tony DiBernardo on our planning board indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That's the end of that one. This time we'll have a general public hearing.
What happened to Watts?
Hmm?
Was there TCA here? Did we scratch them?
Public hearing. He's
Oh,
handing it
okay.
off to Ben.
Did I miss something?
No,
You're
I
good.
I got confused.
You're right on.
At this time, I ask you to take over this, Ben, and conduct this public hearing for us. TCA 2106, general requirement for lots, on page 25 in the book.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best. I'm hoping I'll be able to talk. I was the only person in the room who coughed during your vaccination discussion, and I was a little worried for a moment that I wouldn't be able to talk when we got to this part. This is a public hearing. It's a legislative public hearing on the town code amendment TCA 21-06, which is a amendment of the subdivision ordinance for the town of Southern Shores. We will first have a presentation by staff. Mr. Haskett will provide that presentation. And then after that, I will go through the list of names of people who wish to speak at the public hearing. And then I will ask if there's anyone from the audience who did not sign up who'd like to speak. If you could limit your comments to 4 minutes, that would be nice. And if you could state your name and address when you do come to the podium. Mr. Haskett.
Thank you, Mr. Gallup. Good evening again, council, mayor. TCA 2106 is a request by town staff to amend section 30-96 general requirements. A little bit of background, at the June 1st, 2021 town council meeting, council conditionally approved, instructed the planning board to recommend a town code amendment that would allow the ability of subdividing property that does not have frontage on a public street. At the June 2021 planning board meeting, town staff provided and the planning board recommended approval of ZTA 2107 lot access requirements. After further review of ZTA 2107, it was determined that the ZTA would render existing lots with frontage on an easement non-conforming, and council took no action on it at the July 6, 2021 council meeting. TCA 2106, which is before you all tonight, removes the possibility of creating new lot or lots that only have frontage on an easement, and that's removed from section 30-96F. Per the town planning board at their meeting, it also removes suggestions with the word should in section 36-96F and G. With respect to this amendment, town staff determined that it's, or the amendments rather, are consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan, and the town planning board recommended approval 6-0 with the additional amendments to section 30-96F and G at the July 19, 2021 planning board meeting.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Haskett from the council?
How does this impact the applicant that has already applied?
They have already received their preliminary approval. This won't affect
Okay,
the applicants from PSP 2101.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
The deletions in the road name section, is that just cleaning up language or does that apply to the specific?
The planning board felt that should not be included. They just saw it as a way of cleaning it up. That if something was going to, I believe one of the wording from one of the members was if something's going to be prohibited, it should have shall not, and instead of should be avoided.
I was just curious.
Any other questions?
Any other questions, council?
Yep.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Haskett. Has anyone signed up?
I didn't see any paper at all. Anybody signing up?
No one signed up. Does anybody from the audience wish to speak to this text amendment? If you raise your hand really high. I don't see anybody, Mr. Mayor, so I'll close the public hearing and give it back to you.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Council, I need a motion to approve TCA 2106.
I'll make a motion to approve TCA 21-06.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All in favor of approving a motion and in the second, indicate by saying aye.
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 TCA 2106 has been approved by council. I think that gets us down to general public comment. Again, anyone signed up to speak? Jonathan? Nobody? Thank you.
Did not sign up, but I'd like to address something that came up in the meeting that wasn't anticipated.
I'm sorry, you want to speak now?
I would like to speak. I didn't sign up, but I didn't know that the town manager was going to say some of the things that were said. So may I have your permission if you would extend courtesy to speak?
Sure, Ann.
Thank you. Ann Scherdsma, 232 North Dogwood Trail, formerly of 69 Hickory Trail, very close to the intersection of Hickory Trail and East Dogwood Trail. I would like to say that I'm disappointed that you decided not to have closure of the left turn on Sundays for the next 2 Sundays. I do the blog, the Southern Shores Beacon, and for the past 2 Sundays, I've received a report from Tommy Carroll, who lives on East Dogwood, about how oppressive the traffic has been on both those Sundays. I think that maybe the numbers don't tell it. Maybe it's because it's been early in the season, but I think it's disappointing that you're discontinuing the no left turn on Sundays for the next 2 high season Sundays. I also would like to endorse what the gentleman from Circle Drive said about the traffic that's backing up on Ocean Boulevard once you go past the cell tower and people are trying to cut around 12 and come out on Hickory. I have received many complaints also in my capacity as editor of the Southern Shores Beacon about that backup. I get videos all the time showing me how far it backs up to Mockingbird, Periwinkle. And I hope that what I heard tonight was that the town manager is going to be putting no local traffic or local traffic only barricades at the cell tower and also at Juniper Trail. I heard him bring that up, but I didn't hear you actually endorse that. And I would like to say that I endorse that, especially on the stretch of Ocean Boulevard where we have our vacationers staying. Our vacationers are putting up with this traffic that is going through on Ocean Boulevard and backing up on Hickory Trail. So I appreciate very much the opportunity to speak. I didn't expect to hear what I heard from Cliff about the traffic, but I would say that please don't cancel the 2 Sundays and please put up the barricades at those 2 spots. Thank you very much.
Council, anybody have comment? I'll start with you, Leo.
Or council comments?
Yeah.
I don't have any numbers from the tourism board because we didn't meet in July, but yesterday the commissioners did approve the event site facility. Now, there's a lot of hurdles that have got to come with that. The building is going to be about 45 feet in height. Nags Head's code is 43. So, and the size of it's going to be 48,000 square feet, a little over 48. And there's a problem there because they got a 20,000 square foot code that has to be dealt with. And it's going to be designed to handle somewhere between 300 and to no more than 2,500 people for whatever they have, sports, clinics, sports programs, whatever. So you will probably have seen that somewhere in one of them, like Outer Banks Voice or whatever, but that finally got approved. There was a advisory committee involved with it that worked with it for a couple of years. And then we as a tourism board been in and out of it, listening to what the advisory people had. So the one thing is there is no hotel tied to it, none whatsoever. So that rumor's been running around, but there's no hotel. And that's all we got at this time for the tourism board.
Elizabeth?
Just on that note, some of us attended a presentation by faculty from NC State University at Jeanette's Pier on Wednesday evening about sustainable tourism. It was very interesting. I'm hoping that there'll be something that we can share, whether it's what ends up being published or what ends up being put into the format of a presentation or whatever. But if that does happen, I'm sure I'll be able to get it to Cliff so he can share it on the town website. But it was an excellent presentation. And it was about, just how, the challenges that we're facing with how popular a place we are for people to visit. And it was very interesting. And she interviewed, I guess, 40 different people, one of whom was our very own Cliff Ogburn. So I'm hoping that there'll be something written up. Clark Twitty with Twitty and Company was, Matt may be able to speak more about what Clark's role was, but yeah, he was definitely the sponsor. So anyway, enjoyed going to it. It was very interesting and educational.
Thanks, Elizabeth. 4 of us went to that same meeting, and we heard from a number of speakers about our tourism situation. And the consensus among the people I talked to before and after the meeting was that this past year and a half or so has really tried us, has really pushed us hard as far as what we can handle as far as tourism. In fact, the consensus of the people I talked to that evening was we're at that point, we're at a saturation point with it. We just can't, we don't have the facilities. We don't have the manpower, the labor. That's one of the major issues right there with the restaurants not being able to stay open because they can't have enough employees to serve the public. So it's quite a burden on us to have more tourists than just have fewer tourists, not just in our ability to handle it.
Just to elaborate that, yesterday at the commissioners meeting, there was a business there speaking about this very thing on workforce and housing. And what is beginning to happen to them is the college kids are going to be leaving in the next week to 2 weeks, going back to college. This particular business, in an effort to try to attract people, is giving them, providing 8 weeks worth of free room and board or a place to stay. And I don't know when they started the program, but as of yesterday, he hadn't had any takers. So and what they're doing now, they're trying to partner with like ski resorts that hasn't started yet to maybe come here and then through October, and then they can go back to wherever they came from. So there's a lot of trying to think out of the box to address this whole issue, and the workforce it's not there. I mean, and trying to keep the staff so they don't burn out. That's a big concern of the owners.
Thank you, Leo. Jim?
I've recently gone to 2 meetings that I'd like to kind of summarize as quick as I can. One of them is the library committee has started back up. They've met a couple times already in the last few months, but they're basically where they were a year ago before this Corona world hit. They were right at the cusp of petitioning the county for some funding to help move this along. They're back at that stage right now, but as a very simplistic review of the meeting, but just be aware that it is back in, they're meeting regularly now. The other meeting I went to, again, both of these meetings were last week, was on the Monarch Flyway. As many of you may recall, maybe nobody will recall, a few months ago, we designated Southern Shores as a Monarch Butterfly Flyway. And when we passed that resolution, it came with some commitments that we were supposed to make, as I recall. Well, anyway, the long sum of this is right now we're heading toward a late October planting of about 3,000 plants, milkweed plants. Milkweed's a wetland plant, so we're looking at those wet areas and everything. So that's kind of moving along, and that's a very positive thing. Seems I've become some butterfly expert because I've designed some butterfly gardens, but I'm learning a lot about the monarchs and the milkweeds and everything. But anyway, that's a very positive thing that I, hope that we'll be able to get some press on, and once we get started on that. That's all.
Thank you, Jim. Matt?
No, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Matt. No further business. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Leo. Get a second?
Second?
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming out, folks.
All right.